Good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's webinar. As usual, I can see plenty of people are just joining as we hit the hour. So we'll give it another 1 minute or two just to let people join, and then we'll dive into the webinar. Okay, let's get started. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody joining today. Excitingly, it looks like we have quite a global audience for today's webinar, so thank you very much for registering and joining. Today's webinar is brought to you by FisherITS and Lansweeper. We're very excited to have Lansweeper joining us today, and we will introduce the speakers in a moment. Just before we do so, in terms of housekeeping, everybody in attendance of the webinar today is placed on mute on entry, but your questions are really welcome. If you've ever joined a FisherITS webinar before, you'll know that we try to get through as many audience questions as we can, so please use the questions pane in your user display in order to ask those, and we'll go through those as we go along. Today's webinar, we're going to be discussing how the licensing experts at FisherITS use the really great IT inventory data that the Lansweeper Discovery platform provides to perform really crucial software asset management services to our customers, and show how you can perhaps do the same if you're an existing Lansweeper user or you're considering investing into that tool platform. So the webinar will begin with my colleague Hans just talking you through why these kind of processes are important and how this data is used, and then we're going to get a good dive into the Lansweeper tool from Esben, who is our colleague at Lansweeper. So welcome Hans. Esben, Hans, would you like to just give a quick introduction of yourself?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone, or morning, depending on where you are. I'm Hans Morkens, a senior manager at FisherITS and expert in a lot of different SAM categories. In my former life, I used to be an auditor for several vendors, so I've seen quite a bit around the block, and I'm quite familiar with most of the techniques around software asset management. So hopefully we can teach you something today. Over to Esben, I assume.
Yeah, thanks, Hans. Esben.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Esben, the technical product evangelist now at Lansweeper. I've been at Lansweeper for just over 4 years. Started out there as technical support, did a bunch of community work at Lansweeper as well, and eventually moved over to the product team where I was a product expert, and now kind of back more towards the marketing direction, where I'm currently in charge of all technical content. So all the good, expert tips, technical content reports that you see from Lansweeper. Hopefully you enjoy them because they're my work.
Super, thanks very much, Esben. Thanks, Hans. Before we start, we'll just have a really quick reminder of who FisherITS and Lansweeper are. So beginning with FisherITS, we are a software asset management and licensing consultancy firm. We're based in the UK, but work with clients around the world to assist with activities such as license audits, defence, major contracts reviews ahead of events such as renewals, for example. We also offer full-scale software asset management managed services. The company is almost entirely made up of software licensing consultants who, very much like Hans, have a background as either auditors for the major auditing firms or the software vendors themselves. So there's a lot of consultants who have changed sides in recent years from being the people who used to audit companies to now working on organisations' behalf. If we pop over to the Lansweeper slide, and I'll let Esben just give a brief overview of who Lansweeper are. Over to you, Esben.
Yeah, thank you. So if you've never heard of Lansweeper yet, we're an ITS and management software. What we do is basically we interiorize your IT. That's what it comes down to. Create one central overview of all your IT assets. We do that primarily agentless, so no need to manage thousands of separately installed agents and devices. To give you, that one overview of literally any device you have, any device that has an IP address, Lansweeper will be able to scan it, pick it up, and give you a complete overview of all of it.
Thanks, Esben. So Hans, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Esben. So for today's topic, we're going a bit into the basics. So potentially for some of the more seasoned SAM professionals on the call, on this webinar, there won't be too much news for you, but hopefully you can still pick up something. And if you are fairly new to software asset management or IT asset management, hopefully we can get you started with what you need to look for. So the main topic is then what is an ELP? How do you get to an effective license position specifically? That's what it stands for. And then also, how can we use Lansweeper to get to there? So first of all, what's an effective license position? An effective license position is the foundation of a lot of software asset management. It basically tells you what kind of licenses you're using, what kind of license you've got available, and it helps you in pretty much anything that a software asset manager wants to achieve. So first of all, if you've got risk management or you're preparing for an audit, it's always good to already know what your situation is so you don't have to be surprised. If you're renewing a contract or annual Microsoft renewal, for example, or IBM renewal, you definitely want to know where you're at so you can optimally negotiate it. If you're transformation projects or also just trying to optimize and trying to see where could you save some money, it's all starts by knowing what you do, getting the data together and see it. And we just want to clarify that we believe that SAM has evolved far beyond. It used to be that the effective license position was the core and pretty much the entirety of what software asset managers were doing, were living by. Right now, it's a lot more agile, a lot more trying to get the right information, but you still cannot achieve what your goals is if you do not have that data. So it's very important to still produce those documents every once in a while, or at least far enough that you can use it to get optimal results. Now, what exactly is an effective license position? Well, the foundation is very simple. One end, you got your entitlement, everything you own, everything you ever purchased, or what you're currently renewing in your subscriptions, and so onwards, so what you're allowed to use. And on the other hand, we've got the software usage, what you consume, so everything that's actually installed, that's actually being logged into, that's out there for employees, for colleagues to use. Now, obviously, if we then deduct the software usage from your entitlement, you get to that effective license position and you get to know what is your state at the moment. Now, what's a lot of definitely in software audits, because they always include this, but what's often focused on is that people want to see everything as positive numbers. This is actually not correct. So ideally, every effective license position is 0. Practically, it won't be feasible because you always need a little bit of spare just to make sure you're not caught off guard when your usage increases. But If you've got a negative number, it means that you're overusing. It means that you've got some software installed that you're not allowed to use, which could bring you a problem of breaching contract terms. And obviously, audits can come by, vendors can claim to get that extra money in, which you want to avoid. But on the other hand, you've got then that positive number where you're overusing, which is also not where you're underusing and where you've got more licenses, which is also not optimal because it means you're overspending. And this is exactly where you could save some money. So ideally, we'd want to get every single number on that effective license position to 0. And when we carry on to see how you would create this document or this effective license position, there are 2 concepts that define the quality of any ELP. And this is always what we validate as well when people provide us with information, when we also, if we're helping customers with audits and they've got one of these reports, there's 2 things we always need to review. First of all, completeness. And this and the next term have been hammered into me from day one since I got into the SAM business, since I became a licensed auditor initially, and then a SAM consultant. So completeness specifically is you want to make sure you're not missing anything. And this seems like something obvious, but this is one of the biggest mistakes we often see, where we come in, people provide us with the data, they go, all right, this is everything we've got. We take a look and we say, yeah, but you're missing this environment. Have you thought about that? And often we just uncover things left and right that people just didn't think of. So look into separate domains, for example, DMZ environments, subsidiaries, and so on. There's tons of little environments that people might be missing if you do not cover everything. So every ELP, step number 1 is making sure that there's nothing out there that you're missing, that is complete, that you've got everything included. And the second term, which is equally important, is accuracy. Making sure that the data you've got available that you're using is correct. And the most common issue we see in this space of accuracy is people relying on spreadsheets. Everything has been manually entered could be wrong. It will change. People might not have copied it correctly. It is not unlikely, for example, that we talk to database administrators. They say, oh yeah, this is my spreadsheet of every database we own or never installed. We double check it and we find mistakes everywhere. So every time be careful. If you get any document, any data, where does it come from? How was it collected? Can you actually trust it? Will it have everything? This could also be even automated tools won't find everything. For some, software is not visible easily, cannot be easily defined, cannot be easily found. And then your software tool might also be making mistakes. So those 2 terms are very important and something that's always important to double check, both in the sources you use and in the results you see. Is always double check that the effective license position is complete, you've got everything, and that it's accurate, that the data sources are all correct, and that there's no mistakes out there. Now, how do you then create this effective license position? So there's 4 stages that we always go by. And I see the third is actually doubled, but it should be number 4 there. So first of all, you've got the planning stage. Then what we call foundation data gathering. Then step number 3 is advanced data gathering. And step number 4 is actually making your effective license position, putting everything together. Specifically, what do we understand under these terms? So first of all, the planning phase. You want to make sure that you've got the key stakeholders identified. So who wants this work? What are they actually looking for? And where will I have to go to find my data? And so onwards. You want to properly map that out so there's no surprise along the way. You also want to figure out what is the actual scope. Obviously, if you go in and people say, hey, I want a Microsoft internal audit done, I want to have an ELP for Microsoft, make sure you actually understand what they're looking for. Are they looking for including every desktop, or actually also focused on the servers? Maybe it's not just Microsoft, but they actually also need some VMware. Some vendors might also have things, for example, if you look at a vendor like Quest, which had a lot of former software that was published under the Dell name and so onwards. So you always want to make sure that you understand perfectly well what do we want to cover. And beyond that, then obviously, if you know who is looking for it, what's the scope, create your project plan, create expectations, timelines, so you can enforce them along the way. Once we've got that set, we can do our foundation data gathering. And we call it foundation data gathering because it builds your foundation, what helps you figure out what is going on in the environment. So gather, that basically comes down to find all the readily available information. So the items that you do not have to dig in too deep, so just collect all contracts and entitlements you can find that are even the slightest bit relevant to try and understand what's all the software we've bought in the past. You don't have to put it all together yet. You can just start filtering out the keywords, seeing what's the software titles, what's the metrics associated with it, and just figuring out what kind of software is out there potentially. You get your full software inventory, so that's finding every machine, what's installed on it, and just start making a list or seeing for that specific vendor what's the software we've got installed out there, and then collect some more information like hardware details already, just things you can just readily find available around the business. And with that information, you can start making some working documents to one, again, completeness, making sure the data is complete. If you see more hardware information out there, for example, you've got an Active Directory extract, or as we'll see later, you could get an extract from Lansweeper. If you've got that hardware extract, you want to make sure that for every machine in that extract, you've also got the relevant software in, that associated with it. Because if they don't match, you might be missing information. And the second part, very important then, just try to pick out every individual product and all the metrics. So how is this software piece licensed? Just so you can then start figuring out what's the extra data you need. Because while obviously for the easy software, as we could call it, for example, if you've got some Office installations on desktops, you can normally just count 1-to-1, one license, one installation. With Office 365, one user, one license. So it sort of matches out. You can always do the work probably if you just have your software inventory and your contracts. But for many pieces of software, it's more complicated. Vendors have complicated measurement techniques, tricks. You might have to dig into it. So that's why we get into step number 3. Once you've got the foundation data, start listing for every piece of software, what information do I need to get to the bottom of it? Does it have specific additions? Does it have special metrics, special techniques to figure out what information we do, and start seeing where could I get this extra information? So for example, you could check your SAM tools like Lansweeper will, for example, have some additional information that could help you out for some software. You could find the relevant consoles, so some software is installed and has licensing consoles that will list this information, or find application owner or anyone else in the business that knows the software better and can help you out. If you've got everything from this step and you've gone one by one through every software title, you can just put it together and in the end get your ELP together. If we look into a specific example, for example, Microsoft, one of the most well-known publishers out there, what would we do for this one? So first of all, if we look in the foundation data, we would get contracts entitlements, so get your latest enterprise agreement and so forth. Also specifically for Microsoft, you can ask a Microsoft license statement from a reseller, which will list everything if your own databases do not have everything information available. Get your hardware inventory together, an overview of every Windows client server. Make sure you're not missing any of them, and your virtualization as well, just to get that full inventory so you can start counting the number of laptops, desktops, servers you've got with the software installed that need to be licensed. Get your software inventory together, so all the Microsoft software installed on every single machine. That is, again, then matching a hardware inventory. And as it's Microsoft, a lot of the software is licensed per user. Specifically now with Office 365, it's more and more common. So get that user inventory as well. And all this information you can gather very quickly because it's usually fairly readily available if you've got some SAM tools or some other sources that you can look into. And with that, you can then start listing all the software you've got from Microsoft that you've bought at one point, and start seeing, all right, what do I need? So for example, for O65, you might not have that readily available yet if you just got a user inventory. So you might want to go to that console or another source that will show you exactly what Office 65 software is in use and which users are using it. There is other software that will be more complex, for example, SQL Server, a common issue that our customers have. You might want to have detailed hardware information, for example, virtualization settings. Can the SQL servers move? Where can they go to? What's going on with it? How long has it been there? You want to kind additions, which are often not visible in add remove programs. So if you just look on a computer, it can be difficult to identify, is it a standard, an enterprise, or a free express or developer edition? And you will have special licensing rules that might apply. Clustering, non-production. So it's just all extra little bits that you will need to collect to get that correct usage information for SQL Server. And as a last example, user access software, for example, CAL licenses. It's also not always straightforward. You won't necessarily find it in your user inventory. So you want to check the specific consoles, interview maybe the application owner just to understand, for example, that SharePoint. Are we using it across the business, or is it only one specific environment, a few users that go into it? And don't forget about, for example, multiplexing when multiple users come in through the software through different blocks in between, so servers in between. They could be licensed as well, RDS, and so onward. If you've got all that information ready, you get into your effective license position. As we see an example here, you've got your product on the left. You then get a column with what is the software you're allowed to use, your entitlement, your deployment, so what you're actually using. You can just deduct the second from the first, and then you get to that position where, again, every positive number, a potential opportunity, you might save some money. Every negative number, a potential risk, be careful. Now, obviously, this is a very high-level overview. We've got some other webinars where we try to go in individual vendors a bit more and a bit more detail, so we can definitely cover that another time. But first of all, let's have a look at Lansweeper then with Esben, who will walk us through what the tool can do and how it can help you get all that information so you don't have to manually check it on each and individual machine.
Thanks, Hans. So yeah, I've moved into Lansweeper here to give everyone kind of a view of what it looks like and all the details available. So let me just go full screen here. That way we're a bit more focused. So before I go into the details of what we're seeing here, I just wanted to cover the basics. So Lansweeper is an IT asset management software, meaning that we collect everything, all of the information about your IT environment, we centralize it, and we help you manage your IT. So how do we do that? Lansweeper is primarily agentless, unlike many other tools. Lansweeper will retrieve the information without requiring you to install software on your device first, meaning that we have the capabilities of inventorizing everything in your network, regardless of whether you know it's there or not. With an agent, usually you have to install it, so you already know the device exists. With Lansweeper, you'll be able to also find devices that do not, or that you don't know exist yet, or lying around somewhere, maybe some legacy devices you've laying around. Now we do have alternative ways of scanning. So we do have an agent. Nowadays, with a lot of people working from home and not always connected to a VPN, they're not always connected to your corporate network, meaning that an agent that can scan a device and then send the results back to your Lansweeper installation is something that is needed, and we have that with LS Agent. The last kind of method is that we also have passive scanning, which we call Asset Radar. So Asset Radar will do a passive scanning method where it uses a network interface to listen to the network traffic and intercept packages and try to scan the IP addresses that are flying by, so to speak. And we combine that with our credential-free recognition technology to gather as much data as we can without even needing any type of credentials. So even if you haven't entered any credentials yet within Lansweeper, we'll try and pull back as much information as we can. Using some machine learning, we can quite easily categorize devices even without any credentials. But obviously, if you have the credentials and you enter those, we'll get a lot more information. So getting over to the information that you see on screen, I've created kind of a Windows dashboard since that is kind of our focus, at least for today, or a good focus point for today's topic. So I'll start with kind of explaining what you see, and then we'll go into the details. So we have here the last seen devices on by Lansweeper. We have the last seen users. But then in the middle, we have a nice chart of all of the kind of the split of our operating systems that are within our network, the Windows operating systems that is, since we are focusing on Windows. On the right-hand side, if you just want a complete list, it's there with all the kind of different Windows editions that are in the environment. And then below that, here in the second chart, we have a split by asset manufacturer. So if you just want an overview of all the manufacturers that are within your IT estate, they're there. And then below that, we have a model overviews if you want to get a view of all the models in your interface. So we have a lot of virtual machines here in this demo environment. So VMware peaks at the top. And on the left-hand side, while we're focusing maybe on Windows today, Lansweeper scans much more. So not just Windows, Linux, and Macs, but also any kind of network devices. We do virtual environments, we do cloud environments. Smaller devices like smart TVs, even down to home automation systems or Chromecasts, anything like that. We also pick up details from that. So let's take a look at some of the Windows information. So easiest way, or one of the easy ways, as you can see, the things on the right-hand side, they are hyperlinked. So I can just click through on them, and that will give me an overview of all of the devices that I have that are Windows 10 Pro. So let's take a look at one of them here. First off, we start on the summary page. So here we get a nice view of kind of the most important information, or some of the most important information about this device. So that means some hardware, some software information, and additional ones. So we obviously know that it's a Windows type. We see the last user. We see the operating system and some details, so which build it is, which domain it's in, the manufacturer, the model, SKU, and then we get some hardware details like the memory, which processor it has, which motherboard it has, even if it has graphics card or not, and then audio information. Below that, a very useful one, antivirus information, which I'll show more about later, as to how this is particularly useful. It also shows whether it's enabled or up to date, something that is quite important as well. And then we have network information about your network interfaces, hard disk information. So how many partitions do you have? How big are they? How full are they? How close they are to being maxed out? And then OU information. What OU is the device located in, and is it enabled or not? And on the right-hand side, you have some scanning information. You also have actual physical location information. So if you want to, you can upload blueprints into Lansweeper and then mark on those blueprints where what the physical location of that device is. And then we have some additional warranty information below that with the serial and express code. So going down below, we have asset groups. So that shows you which groups this device is part of. So either static or dynamic groups, however you want to group your devices. And below that, we have the warranty information. So for select vendors, so select manufacturers, we pull back warranty information, provided that the details like the serial number and express code and etc. are all scanned. Then we'll be able to pull back the warranty information and also provide you with the information of how many devices in your network are actually still within warranty, which ones are close to running out, and which ones have already expired. Very useful. And below that, we have automatic relations. So we have 2 automatic relations to our monitors. So if Lansweeper can detect a monitor connected to your machine, then it will already create a relation there for you. And then at the bottom, there's no entries, but you can scan event log information as well if you want to report on any events that have occurred, or just browse through them. Then the other tabs here at the top are all just detailed versions of kind of the summary information, along with even additional things. So, going into Windows, anything from operating system details to Windows Update information, auto runs, as you can see here, shares, map drives, who has access to them, etc. It's all there. BitLocker encryption, is it enabled or is it not? It's all there. Hardware, so any type of hardware information you want, from whether it be motherboards, up to USB, are there USB devices connected to the machine, the trusted platform module, which TPM version do you have, is it enabled or not, those kind of things. Any display information, or network information, disk information, or user information, it's all there listed and ready for you to use and also report on later on. Heading over to software, we get a complete list of all the software information along with the version, publisher, install date, and whether it's user specific or not. All of this, as you can see, is hyperlinked. So there I go, already clicking on something. If you want to get a list of, where else is this software information installed, then you can just click on it, and it will, you'll just jump over to that next overview. You can do the same thing for versions. So if I click on a version number, I'll get an overview of all of the installations with that specific, or all the devices with an installation with that specific version. And obviously the same thing goes for publisher as well. Now, if you're managing a lot of servers and you're installing some specific features on them for server roles, etc., we also scan the features that are installed. So if you do install any features on Windows like ISS, or IIS, I should say, then that's also shown here. License keys, we do scan by default a limited amount of license keys, but this is configurable. So if there are any license keys that are in the registry that you'd like to scan, you can configure it there and retrieve them back. The antivirus information, and then a last thing, unfortunately there's no SQL Server information here, but I'll go to one that does. There we go. That's this virtual machine actually that it's running on software, and SQL Server information. So if you have a SQL Server installed on a machine, then it also gives back, the instances, which edition those instances are, the license that's linked to it, additional information like the language, etc., the status of the service or the services, the databases that are included, that are run on that instance, and also their size. So as you can see here, I've got 2 editions on it actually. I've got a 2016 and 2019. So yeah. All that information is available for you to report on as well. And then we also have performance information. So if you want details on how much CPU is being used by this machine, how much memory, how much disk usage, how much network usage, then you can enable that as well as uptime. When was the device on, when was it turned off, when was it rebooted, that type of information. Event log, histories, maybe one that we can take a look at. So both software and hardware information is kept in history as well. So you can see when updates were done, when new software was installed, when hardware was removed. All of that is there. And that's a very, very quick overview of a Windows device. So let's head back over to our dashboards here. So that was Windows. Taking a quick look at virtual environments and some of the other dashboards here. So VMware, we scan the complete VMware range. So if you want, you can starting from the vCenter management server down to data centers, EXI host, and their guests. It's all mapped here, and we got a nice topographical overview, so you can have some more structure and an easier overview of what's hosted where. And again, if these are Windows machines and you scan them as Windows machines, all of those details that I just showed off, those will all be available for all of those guests or hosts or vCenter servers, depending on how you've got your environment set up. Then for Citrix, we also scan the virtual environments for Citrix. So if you have a virtual environment running in Citrix, then you can get similar data from there. And then moving on to cloud. So again, similar idea, whether it be AWS or Azure, you can scan your cloud environments. Again, if you scan those machines directly, then we'll get even all of those Windows details that I just shown, also then shown on top of the more AWS specific information. It'll say here, as you can see, that it's an AWS type. And then in config, I can actually go to the AWS specific information if I wanted to see more information about that, like the instance information, host information, network interfaces, volumes, and even down to security groups, which security groups is it a part of, etc. So all that information is there for you to use and pull lists of, report on, basically, so you can check. Not only get a list of all your AWS machines that you're running, but also which security groups, which ones are part of which security groups, etc. So that's all there and possible. So let's head back here to where we were. There we go. Obviously, we pull back a lot of information from Active Directory as well, but instead of showing you that, I'm going to go to our Office 365 information. So if you're using Office 365, then you're in luck because we also scan that. So here you can see our Office 365 organization with the domains, the global admins. It even goes so far as it's showing you users where your strong password policy or enforcement isn't enabled. You get an overview of all of your groups, all of the licenses, as well as if you wanted to go through on this, you can take a look at everyone that is linked to that license as well. You can see how many of those licenses are in use or already consumed and how many are enabled, etc. So there's plenty of details there, a list of all the users, the mailboxes, and any contacts or active sync devices as well. If you're still on Exchange, then we also still scan that. So if you want to take a view at your CAL licenses and how many users there are included in that, or just a list of users or their mailboxes, again, similar information as Office 365 is available there as well. So with that, I think I've covered a lot of those details here. I just wanted to touch on maybe 2 network devices. So let's take a look at a switch and a printer here, just to give you some idea of what network devices look like, because a lot of other options they like to exclude network devices. But with Lansweeper, you get the full range. So for printers, for example, we even pull back the status of the toners, and you can even report on that. You can put alerts on it. So that your office management is alerted when they need to start ordering new toner. That way, you prevent getting those issues at your desk, and that you have to fix the printer again for the X number of time. Heading back, or actually just go to here, and we'll go to switches. There we go, switches. I'll go to a switch. So for switches, we pull back the entire list of kind of the ports and all the information related to that. So here we can see all the ports, their name, alias, description, other details, as well as their speed, the MAC address of the port itself, and then critically linked to that as well, the MAC address that is connected to that port, and that allows us also to kind of give you an overview of, okay, which devices are connected to which ports, making that a lot easier for you to document rather than having to do it with stickers or any other way that you currently do it. And again, this is hyperlinked, so if I wanted to jump over to this machine quickly, I can just click on it and jump over there. But this is one that a lot of our customers also really appreciate, this visibility. All right. So having all of that covered, I just wanted to mention that this isn't everything that I've shown up to now is just a small part of Lansweeper. There's much more there to discover. So again, if you're interested, we do have a free trial that is, we don't require any sort of credit card information up front. So it's there for you to grab, try out, see if you like it, see if you get the information that you need, and if you can use it. So I'd highly recommend you to just give it a try when you have some spare time, if you're interested. I think that's the majority there. So I'll hand it back over to Hans to continue on and go in depth on how they can use kind of this information to help you even further in regards to licensing.
My screen froze there for a second, but let's go back into the presentation then. So now a few small tips before we go into questions. Just on our experiences with Lansweeper and how we recommend you to use it if you want to create those ELPs. So first of all, we definitely recommend perform regular completeness checks, as I already mentioned. Your data, your ELP will only be as good as the data you get into it. And while Lansweeper is excellent at finding devices, if it is not aware of some environments, if something is not connected, not reporting in, your data is going to have gaps. So that's why we recommend a quarterly or annual review, just to check that data, review that there's no scanning errors or any gaps in the scanning menu, and also double check with potentially a secondary source. If you've got antivirus, a CMDB, match them together, see how do they work together, is there any gaps, and you can make corrections with that. Pay special attention if there's any non-standard environment. If you've got a DMZ, separate domain, a OS X or Unix environments, often they do not report an Active Directory, so you want to double check what's going on with them. Furthermore, so there is also a license compliance module, which can provide record keeping for your licenses, at least in a small overview. And you can include for install-based licensing, you can link those up as well, just for BAU. So you've got a dashboard that shows you which licenses you might be short or over licensing for. For more advanced, you will probably have to get it out there and see what you want to do. You can build your core foundation data on that software, hardware, user inventory, and rapidly from that move to that advanced data phase, gather the information you need and work from there. Specifically for some cases like SQL Server, like of65, as was already mentioned, you can actually get a lot of that information through Lansweeper as well. And as a last recommendation, there is a built-in traffic light system as well, where you can highlight some specific software titles and so onwards. If you want to pay special attention, if you've noticed it, it can be good for data recollection and so onward. We generally do not recommend to do it for every single title included. It's going to take weeks at the very least, but you can definitely highlight the ones that you want to pay attention to, just so you know what to look out for. So with that said, there's also a trial offer from our end. Ben, do you want to share some information on that?
Yeah, sure. So as Esben mentioned, Lansweeper offer a free trial for all users, which we definitely recommend you taking a look at. It's available directly from the Lansweeper website. Should you wish to engage with FisherITS, perhaps if you are interested in a licensing review or an audit defense or the like, you can also engage with that free trial through the FisherITS website at the link displayed. We do have an offer on at the moment for Lansweeper users. That's current Lansweeper customers or new customers or trial users that should you wish to engage with FisherITS for one of the topics that I mentioned, that is offered at discounts. And the reason being is because a lot of the data that we actually use will be provided by that Lansweeper platform. So it helps with the process. So yes, if you are interested in finding out a little bit more about that, the link is on screen, and we'll also be distributing the recording and slides to everybody who registered for the webinar as well.
All right, and with that said, I think we can go into questions. I would recommend anyone, so we'll have a look at what's already been asked, but if there's any question on a specific vendor or a specific use case for Lansweeper, what our recommendation is, our experience. From our experience, every vendor has their own difficulties, their own complexities, and not every SAM tool is suited for every specific use case. Just the same, so yeah, we definitely are open to have a discussion on when we would recommend Lansweeper, where another tool might be better, and so onwards as well. So I think, Esben, one question that came in is, could you see, for example, SQL Server, how much times each database has been accessed? So is there any usage counter or read-write counter?
Mm-hmm. So by default, we don't track any kind of software usage. There are some ways to, depending on what you're really after, there are some ways to get around that or to accomplish getting some data. An example for just regular software would be that we do have a file scanning option where you can actually scan the file properties, which will give you, at the very minimum, it will give you when a file was last accessed. It's not really usage in the classic sense, but it gives you some idea, at least, if the file was recently used or not. Regarding specifically SQL databases, it's not something that we really scan. The only option that I can think of would be that using the SQL Server auditing, that you connect it to your Windows event log and let it create Windows event log entries, and then scan those Windows event log entries with Lansweeper, or just scan the event log with Lansweeper and report on it that way. However, I'm not sure if the SQL Server auditing lets you create Windows events specifically on whether database connections have been made or have been accessed, etc. So that's the best answer I can give on that front.
And yeah, maybe to add there, from my experience, this is something I think almost no SAM or item tool provide. I think there's dedicated database tools that can do a better job out there, but always be careful with read-write to a database, because some databases just aren't used very often, but then get a lot of downloads, and opposite as well. So it's not always the most reliable situation, but it'd be very interesting to see if tools can actually solve that problem and really start showing how, if you need a database still, so to say. So I'll take the next question here. So one is, do you support OS like AIX and Linux? From my experience, yes, we've been able to find every type of operating system that we've encountered, at least the more regular ones. Maybe there's some very dodgy ones out there, but AIX, Linux, we've definitely been able to see, and you can see the software installed on those machines as well. Do correct me if I'm wrong, Esben, but I assume that sort of covers it.
Yeah, that's fully supported.
And one question I'll throw back to you. So past users of Lansweeper some years ago indicated that when Lansweeper was scanning, their VPN performance was degraded, so to stop the scan. Is this an issue that you're aware of, Esben, and has there been any actions undertaken against that?
It's a difficult one because it depends so heavily on exactly what their setup was. Because you can either, a VPN can be used to just connect a couple of machines to the network, and that way Lansweeper would be scanning those machines via the VPN. However, if you're using a VPN to, for example, connect a scanning server to the Lansweeper database, where you're basically pushing all of the data that scanning server is picking up somewhere across the world through that one VPN, that might be a different story. Personally, I have never heard of any network issues using Lansweeper. I've heard other tools have had issues where once they go over a certain amount of assets with scanning, their performance starts to degrade. Lansweeper is one of the few ones where I've personally, and even during my 2 years in support, I've never had any tickets where people indicated that their network was having issues because of Lansweeper. Obviously, there can always be, exceptions to that. But even if you're having issues with the VPN nowadays, if it's really the fault of Lansweeper, or you really think it's the fault of Lansweeper, switch to LS Agent. Let the scans go through the cloud server or the cloud relay that we use with LS Agent. So you're kind of circumventing the usage of the VPN, and then you'll be easily be able to find out whether it was Lansweeper or not. So there are alternatives for that, should that be an issue.
Yeah. And from my experience as well, so obviously we've seen a lot of SAM tools in our time, and yeah, I think almost every SAM tool I've ever seen has had environments where there was similar complaints. So I think it's almost unavoidable just because of how computer networks are built. For some reason, in some situations, you're always going to have something that overloads. Just maybe there's a firewall that keeps sending something back or whatever. There's so many potential situations. So definitely do test the SAM tool, see if different situations might help and how you can work around that. But from my experience as well, I do believe that Lansweeper is a fairly low impact tool. So I haven't had too many complaints about it overloading networks. That doesn't mean it can't happen. I'll trust Esben's words that they've done their best to avoid it, of course. All right.
It would be it would be a first for me to see us cause any network issues, but it can happen.
Yeah, and I assume also specifically VPN performance. VPNs are always dangerous because you're relying on people's home Wi-Fi and so onward. So you never know how unsuccessful or successful that could be.
Yeah, that's always the case, and like I mentioned, if you're really after scanning assets remotely, you have the LS Agent option that would circumvent the VPN requirement anyway. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think for the SQL there was a follow-up. If we have a database but require a license but are not accessed and used. Yeah, and this is absolutely right. It's something that's very difficult, but that is also because some databases just won't show activity. So absolutely, it's can be difficult to get down to the bottom of where you want to assign your licenses, where you want to turn off machines. What could help is just turning it off and see if anyone complains if it's not a critical database, but that's at your own risk, of course. All right. I think that covers actually every question there is. Seems like there's everything was pretty clear then.
Yep.
Definitely, if there's anyone that still wants to ask something or has a specific SAM use case or problem, please don't hesitate to shoot something over. But if not, I don't know if we want to end it here or if you've got any topics you want to cover, Edwin.
No, I think we're done here then, and we can call it a wrap.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that's all good with me, Hans. Thanks very much, Esben, as well for joining us. It's been a real pleasure having you along.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Hans. Let's we'll wrap up here. Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Bye.